Hi, Tiernan here from Key Catalyst. Welcome back to another video from the Marketing Doctor. Today's video is very impromptu. It's based on a lot of conversations that I've had this week with both healthcare founders and other people that I speak to a lot about marketing and funnels. And today's video is going to be all about two concepts. So the first concept being friction and the second concept being qualification, and how we can use both of them to get better quality leads, which in result lets us pay less for the qualified leads that we get and pay less for our acquisition. My view on this is very different from what other people's views typically are, which is why I'm going to make a video about it. Stick around. The people that this video will be useful for, so everyone we work with is in healthcare, so the video is going to be guided towards healthcare entirely. It's going to take two lenses. One of the groups of people we help are private healthcare providers, and so we'll talk about that a lot. The other group are clinician-led companies who are typically targeting doctors or students, and so it will all be within healthcare. The concepts can be applied across different industries, I'm sure. So two concepts, one being friction and the other being qualification. So I haven't entirely planned out everything that I want to talk about in the video, and I find it helps with the quality of these videos if I don't, because there's some things that are just really important to talk about that will end up coming up, and as always you're going to have to deal with the really horrible handwriting. So what is friction, and what does friction mean, and then how do we add friction, and how do friction and qualification work together to get us better leads, and more of the right people interested in our services. So first thing we're going to talk about is qualification and what qualification actually looks like. So there's two different things that we want to talk about when it comes to qualification. We want to talk about the difference between a lead and a qualified lead. So really simply, a lead is anyone who has given us their information. So they've given us a way to contact them, and they've registered some sort of interest in our services. So typically they've given us an email address and their name. Maybe also they've given us a phone number. So a lead is not inherently qualified. We need to differentiate between a lead and a qualified lead. A qualified lead is someone who we determine is a good fit for our services. So a good fit in some way. Whereas a lead is just someone who's given us their information and shown interest. The problem is you do not want to be in a scenario where you get loads and loads of leads with very few qualified leads. Your ideal scenario is that you have a good ratio of lead to qualified lead. And the reason I take this approach, and some people are less strict about this, is because I want most of my time spent on qualified leads and not on leads who are technically not qualified, not a good fit. The exercise that we can implement here, and again this applies for both private healthcare providers and for other clinician-led companies, the exercise that we can go through here is asking ourselves, what makes a lead qualified? So if I came to you tomorrow with a prospective patient or with a prospective doctor, prospective B2B prospect, what would make them qualified to you? And the way you can answer that with yourself is, who would I be happy to get on the phone with where I think I could get them interested in my service, or that there's a likely chance that I could help them, and so there's a likely chance that they might also buy my services, buy my product. The way that we work this, and I'm going to take the example of a private healthcare provider, so like a Harley Street clinic, how we deem someone to be qualified versus just a lead or an unqualified lead is, again, a lead is just someone who's shown interest, given us their name and email, fine. I do not want to call everyone, and I'm sure the doctors and dentists that we work with don't want to call everyone that's just given their name, their email and a phone number. Similarly, if you're a doctor that's running a webinar series, a masterclass series, you've got a private program, you help doctors run their private clinics, whatever it is, you don't want to call everyone or email personally everyone who has just given you their details and shown interest, right? You want to get more specific on what makes someone a really good lead. Something I always talk about is ICP, your ideal customer profile. your ideal client profile. This goes back to that. We're not going to go deep dive into this at the minute, but the more you know who your ideal audience are, the easier it is to come up with these 3 points that would make someone a good fit. If we jump in and look at what we use for good fit, as an example for a private clinic on Harley Street, we look at specifically treatment. What that looks like in our case is they have to specifically have requested information about dental implants, not just general dentistry, not cosmetic dentistry, but specifically about implants. They then have to also be price aware. So actually the lead magnet that we use shows them the price, so they have to be price aware, they have to have seen the prices. They have to show an urgency to start treatment. What that means is an urgency doesn't mean we're giving them a countdown timer to begin treatment. It's nothing to do with that. What urgency means in this case is we give them multiple options. We say, do you want to start treatment ASAP, in the next 2 weeks, in the next 3 months, or beyond that? If they say beyond that, then we won't get in contact. If they say any of the other times, we might. What does this actually look like practically? If I have a lead form, I get their name, I get their email, and I get their phone number. Then they move on to the next part of the lead form. The lead form asks them if they're interested in dental implants. If they say yes, when are they interested? So it asks them this question basically. If they then answer a specific, if they say ASAP, 2 weeks, or within the next 3 months to any of them, we at one point would have called them. Actually, I'm lying, we do have one more question. We just ask them if they're okay for us to give them a call. So we check that they're okay with us giving a call. We check that they're interested in actually getting implants sometime in the near future, and they're not just exploring. We actually have a just exploring option here too. And they're already price aware, because the reason why they're giving us their information is because they're asking for a price list. So they're definitely going to be aware of price by the time we call them. This has gone from, if you can imagine, if I get rid of this whole box, if I get rid of this entire box, that is basically just a lead. If I add that second box in with all these questions, I have now determined that by the questions that I've asked, that's a qualified lead. The nuance here is how much friction you add will often determine how close to your qualified lead you can get. So for this campaign, as an example, the specific campaign I'm talking about with the implants, we had a cost per qualified lead of between 10 to 15 pounds, roughly. People were like, we can give these guys a call, this seems appropriate. Then what happened? So you get feedback. Let me just make sure you guys can see this as well. Then you get feedback from whoever calls your leads. If you're a principal dentist in one of your clinics, you'll be the lead clinician in any of your clinics. If you're a startup and you're the person actually involved in the market and sales, you have this process with yourself. If you've got a marketing department, you talk to them. If you've got lead setters and closers and you've got SDRs and everything, then these are the people you have the conversation with. But you basically have a conversation with everyone, or with yourself, depending on who's making these decisions and who's having the calls. And the feedback that you want to get is on quality. So how qualified are the calls that we are having? Here are the things you want to look out for. People saying that the people who are getting on calls are unqualified for some reason. So let's say, as an example, and again I can give you some real stats for this. You had 60 leads come through. Again, imagining for like a dentist, you had 60 leads come through. Of the 60, 40 were deemed to be qualified based on our previous criteria. But of the 40, only 20 picked up when they phoned. Of them, only 10 were interested. And of the 10, only 1 booked in, which is very normal scenario, especially when you're rolling out a new marketing campaign, you're trying a new form. The problem that you now have is that you want to adjust your qualification questions and your qualification processes in order to add more friction to the funnel. The reason why we want to add more friction here is because I've got 60 people coming through with my existing qualification criteria, bringing that down to 40 who we're saying are qualified. But if I've got 40 qualified leads and only 1 of them book in, there's 2 problems. Either they get people on the phone aren't great, which could be a problem, and that's something else in the follow-up. That could all be one thing. That's not the topic of the video today. The more likely problem, and the problem that I like to solve first, is that actually our qualification criteria is not strong enough. What we then want to do is make our qualification process more, we want to add more friction to it. So we want to make it harder for people to get on a call rather than easier. Let's move to that. So we want to add more friction. There's 2 ways that we can add a lot more friction very quickly. The easiest way to add more friction is to increase the number of questions that you ask. If you wanted to add the most friction possible, what you would say is, actually, we only call people who are ready to start treatment tomorrow and can pay a deposit on the phone right now. You can imagine how very few people would go ahead with that. So you want to increase the number of questions that you ask. This goes back to ICP. So how can I know my ICP better to make sure that I get the right people to answer the questions so that they get through and the wrong people don't get through? You need to know your ICP extremely well in order to start thinking about those. So based on the conversation that we had with this dentist as an example, what we concluded was that another question that we could add, which would help in this case with the qualification process, was what stage are you at? So we added another question which asks them what stage are you at, and it gives them 3 options. First option is I'm looking for implants and I'm looking for, and the wording will be slightly different than what I'm saying now, but basically the thing I value most is having the best experience, having the best implants, something around quality being the most important thing. Other one is I'm looking for implants, but actually I'm just looking for the cheapest implants. Third is I'm actually not looking for implants. So again, someone who's just exploring or really not interested in doing anything anytime soon. So those are the options. You can imagine if someone answers this in the best way, they say, actually, I'm looking for the best implants. As a clinic who are trying to offer the best, who are trying to offer the best experience and aren't trying to compete on price, they are perfect. These guys are probably still worth contacting, just want to get a bit more information from them. But now we've removed anyone who is not going to answer this question, or who is going to say that they're actually just looking around and they're not ready for implants. Just by having this question here, and by having the first option be that they're looking for the best, that will also put people off right away who are just price searching. And the other way that we're adding more friction, and another way you can add more friction, and again, when you add more friction, is you have decided that you're getting lots of leads but not enough of the right leads, and you want to remove the volume, total volume of leads, but add more, increase the ratio of lead to qualified lead. Super easy way to do that is to have more free text boxes. So it's really easy for people to fill out forms that just have multiple choice options or single best answers where they're just clicking through, and that's fine. And if you've got a lead volume problem where you just don't get enough leads, then you want to make it easier for people to fill it out. But if you're in the process where you've got loads of leads but none of them are the right leads, then you add you introduce some free text boxes, because most people who are not serious about your product won't fill them in. So you add a free text box which is tell us a bit more, something really simple like that, and you make it required. So you free text and you make it required. So where this fits into your funnel entirely is your whole marketing process will basically consistently follow this process. You will constantly be trying to get more leads. You'll start by trying to get more leads. Then you'll say, actually, I've got loads of leads, but some of them aren't qualified. So what the second thing you do is you try and increase how qualified those leads are, i.e. you add more friction. Then you're going to say, okay, great, I've got loads of qualified leads now compared to what I had before, but I need more of them. So you then end up again trying to increase lead volume, which is fine. Then you say, actually, okay, now we've opened the floodgates a bit more, we've got more people in, but now we're learning more about what qualified actually means. So you've learned a bit more about your ICP, which is perfect. And then you're going to go back and try and increase the qualification again. And then you're going to increase the number of leads again, and it's a continuous cycle. You're basically learning more about your ICP as you go in order to get more of the right people. What you want to do from your entire funnel perspective is, and this is where some people would disagree with me, your funnel is broken up into different stages. Lots of people at this stage want your qualification to be super low. Basically want anyone to come into your funnel that's vaguely interested. When you've got a limited ad budget, say you're spending £5,000 per month or roughly that, I disagree with that concept, and actually I like making super clear qualifications at the top. So you make it super clear who you're for, who you're not for, what service you offer, what service you don't offer at the top of your funnel. So your whole funnel remains a bit tighter, but you'll bleed less money. And I would recommend doing that. How you do that practically, and the changes that you can implement right now, aside from the changes you can implement if you've literally got one of these problems that I'm talking about, what you basically need to do is spend a lot more time working on your ICP. So do you know 5 questions that you could ask right now that would separate your leads from your qualified leads that you would be really confident with? If you don't know those 5 questions, it's just a really good exercise to go away and work on. And again, principle, if you want more leads, reduce friction. If you want more qualified leads when you don't have a lead problem, increase friction. So I hope that was useful. I know I've literally just talked about this from a healthcare, a private healthcare perspective actually, but the rules apply everywhere. You need to know the difference between a lead and a qualified lead. You need to know these specific questions that you can ask in order to work that out. you need to then implement it and know when to turn down your qualification process, when to turn it up, when to add friction, when to remove friction. And the crux of this whole thing is this is all dependent on you being really clear on who your ICP are. So it all comes back to doing more ICP research. Thanks. Hope that was useful.